All right, so let's talk about our keynote speaker and who's coming up here. Erik Qualman, who I've known for, probably about 10 years now. Another good Michigan State grad, so Erik and I share Sparty in common, so go green, go white, Erik. But someone I've seen and watched his career blossom, and a fantastic guy, and I consider him a friend. #1 best-selling author, just published a new book. He's spoken in over 55 countries to 50 million more people. I love this little tidbit. He was voted the second most likable author, second only in the world to Harry Potter's J.K. Rowling. Now, I don't know if he cast a spell on a whole bunch of people to get that rating, but I think that one's pretty impressive. He's the host of the popular Super You podcast and has worked for a number of fantastic companies, from the National Guard to NBC Universal to NASA. And I'm really thrilled and honored to have him here with us today. I know you're going to love his presentation. Really good friend of mine, Erik Qualman. Erik, take it away.
I'm Al Roker. I'm here with Equalman.
Erik Qualman is a Forbes top 50 influencer, entertaining audiences around the world, educating them on digital leadership, and empowering millions.
Often called the Digital Dale Carnegie, Erik Qualman inspires and motivates audiences around the world into becoming digital leaders. Sold-out crowds eagerly learn the latest in digital leadership, digital reputation, and digital trends. You will become disruptors rather than the disruptors. You will become digital leaders.
His book, Digital Leader, voted Erik the second most likable author in the world after Harry Potter's J.K. Rowling.
Word of mouth is now world.
Not suggesting we get rid of face-to-face.
Guinness Book of World Records holder.
What's the social play?
Former sitting professor at Harvard and MIT's edX.
I love what you're doing here. Are you doing more of that
here
today?
Come some G's.
Hey, what an honor to be here today with everybody. Man, I wish I was there with you physically, but hey, it's 2020. And then I'd kick things off here. We're going to talk all about focus, but I'd be remiss. Dan would be upset with me, since we're both Spartans, that he'd be upset if I didn't tell one Tom Izzo basketball story, because I was fortunate to play for Coach Izzo at Michigan State University. So I thought I'd kick things off with a little levity. We'd won on a last, and you guys live in the heart, a lot of you live in the heart of college basketball country, so I think you'll enjoy this. We'd won on a last second shot against Illinois, and Izzo, super excited, he runs into the locker room, and he goes, "Snow, man, you were awesome today on defense. That helped us win. Respert, your offense really helped us win." Then he got in front of my locker, and I hadn't played in the game, so he kind of looks at me, and he pauses, and he goes, "Qualman, you didn't play tonight. That probably helped us out the most." But hopefully that gave you a little good laugh this morning, which we need in 2020. But what we're going to talk about here today is really focus. How do we focus? And as digital leaders, and understanding that digital leaders are made, they're not born. So some of you are already digital leaders. You're going to step further into that digital leadership, being forced to, because everything's going virtual. Others, you're taking those first couple steps into digital leadership. But the key is understanding that digital leaders are made, they aren't born. And before I kick things off on some of the tips and tricks and habits we can use when it comes to focus as digital leaders, I thought I'd have this animation play. So I own an animation studio, and we had some of our animators just put together this quick video to show where we stand with all things digital right here and right now. All right, when we look at that, there's a word in there that pops out. It's called socialnomics. And as things get confusing and challenging for all of us, and so some of you are benefiting from what's happening in 2020 due to the pandemic. Others are faced with challenges like myself during this pandemic. And it's really about understanding that socialnomics is just word of mouth on digital steroids. That's the name of my first book, Socialnomics. But all it means at a 6-second level is that word of mouth is now on digital steroids. What we want to spend the majority of our time talking about here today is really just what does it mean to focus in this ever-changing world. And the key also is for us to remember that technology changes every second, but human nature never does. So what can we do on a day-to-day level to just make sure we're hitting our goals and hitting that vision? Now, it turns out that we could have practiced, that digital leaders practiced 3 habits, could have been 21. We didn't know before we did the research. It turns out there's 5 common habits. Now, all of you are very successful. And so you're hardwired. As I go over these 5 habits, you're going to be immediately going, all right, now I'm going to crush those 5 habits. Absolutely not. Good news is you're already good at these 5 habits. What I want you to do over our time here today is just kind of reset to the one that you're the strongest in. What is your core superpower? And I'm going to go over these in each at a very high level, but at the end, I'm going to ask everyone, and we're going to use the chat functionality for you to put in which one is your superpower. So the first one's simple. Second one's T for true. Third one's A for act. Fourth one's M for map. And then the fifth one's P for people. And as my daughters say, Dad, that spells stamp. Absolutely. It makes it easy for us to remember. So it's about simple, true, act, map, and then P for people. As we look at the first one, we think about simplification. We're living in very complex times, and it's in our DNA. We have old software in our brain. So when things are complex, what we try to do is we come up with complex solutions, which is the exact opposite of what we want to do. We want to have simple solutions. Also, when it comes to all things virtual and digital, we all think it's additive. If you do it right, it actually simplifies things. It should be subtractive, meaning it doesn't add things to your plate, that these tools are there to help your life. And if they're not helping your life, then you've become the tool. And that's what we want to avoid. So it's really about simplification. So an example of what it looks like when there's a complex issue and a simple solution, this is a great example of what that looks like. So how many of you, by a show of hands, still prefer to read on paper? Now I got my hand raised. Yeah, over 90% of us, and this is true at the high school and college level as well, still prefer to read on paper. Now, a lot of us are hybrids, meaning that when the world allows us to travel, we probably read digitally. That's what I do. And then when I'm at home, I read on paper. But it's 25% faster to read on paper. So some folks at MIT looked at this and said, wait, it's 25% faster to read on paper. There's got to be something we can program to make it so it's faster to read on our digital devices. And this is the app that they've come up with. So if you can, just look at your screen and lean in. I'm going to start to show you how this app works. All right, I know some of you top performers are going, why'd you stop it there? I can do 1,000. And then others of you later this week, they'll ask you, how is that keynote speaker on focus? And you're like, I don't remember, but I did read 3 books. That guy was awesome. But when we look at this app, how many words are presented at a time? 1 word. How many letters do they highlight in red at a time? 1 letter. So it's just an example of taking something complex and coming up with a simple solution. Now, how can we simplify our lives? Now, how many of you like to make a to-do list? Yeah, most of you like to make to-do lists. 90% of those top performers like to make to-do lists. How many of you make a not to-do list? Yeah, for yourself, not for your kids. How many of you make a not to-do list for yourself, not for your kids? Yeah, most of us don't. Only 4% of us make a not to-do list. But here's the deal. Digital leaders index very high on making not to-do lists because they understand this concept, which I didn't understand before the research. But we make to-do lists, my to-do list, to-do, keeps growing and growing. And let's say I'm having a great day and I'm focused on number 1, which we know that's rarely the case. Usually we're focused on the urgent rather than the important. But let's say we're having a great day and we're focused on number 1. What we don't know is our brain's trying to complete any unfinished task. So our brain understands that 37's down here, so it's trying to complete that task. So one way to increase our processing power and simplify our lives is actually to have a not to-do list, to start with the not to-do list. And so how do we do that? I'm going to give you this exercise for today. It causes a lot of stress and anxiety, a little bit, for me it does at least, and a lot of you it will as well. But look at your to-do list and just at the top, write the word not, right in front of that. Just write the word not. Now that's your not to-do list. And I want you to look at that list and just pick out the one item, and move that over. That should be your new to-do list. And so how do you define that item? That item should be, what's the one thing that if I do it well, makes everything else either easier or unnecessary? So that's your new to-do list. So again, some of you are going to take away from today is you're going to start making that not to-do list. Others, because of this virtual world, we think we have to be good at multitasking because we think it helps us get ahead of the competition, that it beats Father Time, even though Father Time's undefeated. It's all good intentions, but ironically, we get less done when we're multitasking because what we're doing is we're actually switch tasking, which means our brains try to figure out what's more important, A or B, A or B. In the moment that's switching, there's a loss of efficiency. So much so that our IQ can drop up to 15 points. And as my dad's always very kind to remind me, he's like, son, 15 points, that's a lot for you. You can't afford to lose that. That's the equivalent of not sleeping for 36 hours. And when our teams multitask, their productivity decreases by up to 40%. So I hope all of you take from today is that you're better off single tasking. You'll actually get more done. You'll be happier and also healthier. Now, a lot of what I'm going over is simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Meaning I've known for 9 years that really our brain can't multitask. And yet each and every day I catch myself going, stop multitasking, focus on one thing at a time. I'm a recovering multitasker, so I got to catch myself every day. So again, these things are simple, but that doesn't mean that they're easy. So that's S for simple. As we look at the next one, T for true, a lot of you, your superpowers, you know who you are and where you're going, that vision and that goal, and you take your teams along with you. Now, what we want to do right now is kind of reset to that to make sure that we have that true north. So this is an exercise we're all going to do together. The beautiful thing about being virtual is you're right in front of your mobile or in front of your MacBook or your PC. And so what I want you to do is just open up your email and you're going to send me an answer to this question that I'm going to give you. And my email is equalman@equalman.com. And I want you to type in the subject word, WORD. We've done this now in 55 countries, reached over 50,000 people. Maybe you'll break the record for the fastest response. I'll give you a hint. It's just a one-word answer to the question that I'm about to give you. Again, my email is equalman@equalman.com. Now you have it. So if a question comes up a week from now, a month from now, feel free to reach out and engage. It'll be great. So the question I have for all of us here today, when it comes to T for true, is if someone were to Google your name right now, what's that one word you'd want to show up? So just type that in. What's the one word you'd want to show up for your name? What's that word you'd want to show up 5 seconds from now, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years, 50 years, 500 years? Because what we're talking about is we're not talking pencil, we're talking digital ink. So as you think about that word, send in that word. Here's the top words that are coming in. We've got inspire, kind, passionate, integrity, honest, love, teacher, leader, fun, all great words. And so now what I want you to do is over the next couple weeks is to think through this word and to put it into a sentence, because we got to have that goal, that vision in order to have that North Compass. So it's a good time to reset, especially with all the chaos that's happened in 2020. And so the framework we want to use for this sentence is take that word and it's two blanks so that blank. Now my word is empower. So I'm going to give you my example for my sentence. Now, some of you out there, you might have the word empower. I just saw it come in. Your sentence is going to be different. And again, this is going to take a couple weeks because as Mark Twain once famously said, hey, I didn't have time to write you a short note, so I wrote you a long one. It's really hard to get things tight. So my example for a sentence is to empower people to their best life so that they can inspire others to do the same. So again, I hope you do this over the next couple of weeks to figure out what that is. And also it's a great exercise to do with your teams as well. Now I'm going to quickly tell you my story because I strongly believe that all of us are living the same movie, but we're just different actors and actresses. And so my hope by hearing my story, you can relate to your story and you can take something from it. And most importantly, you avoid doing what I did, which was resist my story for 15 years. So my hope is that you fully step into your story. And that's important when it comes to being true to yourself. And so I haven't always worn these crazy green glasses, but I always thought it was happening to me, but I realized that something was happening for me. So for 15 years with a name like Erik Qualman, and you take your first initial and last name, it forms Equal Man. I hated the fact that I'd come in and people were like, Equal Man could get the coffee. He's super fast. Oh, we need that report over the weekend. Well, Equal Man can work super hard because he's a superhero. And so I didn't like it. I resisted it for 15 years. And I thought it was happening to me. And then one day I realized it was happening for me. I did an interview for a magazine and they wanted to do a cover shoot. And for that cover, they said, hey, we want to have fun with this cover. We'd love for you to wear some Clark Kent like Superman glasses since you have an email address of Equal Man, you have a website, Equal Man. And since it's our St. Patrick's Day issue, we'd love for those to be green. So I take that photo. I don't think much of it. Then a couple weeks later, I fly to Kenya to give a talk. Now, the night before I'm going to give that talk, I was going to a rescue shelter to adopt a baby cheetah, not to take home. My wife would kill me, but just to support the local area. And on the ride over, the lady that I'm with, she says, hey, we had the Olympic sprinter Usain Bolt here earlier this week, and he adopted from the same litter that you're going to adopt from. We filmed him. We'd love to film you, and we'd love to splice that video together to help raise more money for the shelter. I said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then she pauses and she looks at me and she goes, but obviously when we're filming, we want to make sure that you're wearing your green glasses. And I look at her, I go, oh, I don't wear those around all the time. I'd look like an idiot walking around with green glasses all the time. And the look on her face told me everything I needed to know, that it was time for me to step into my story. And now I'm kind of stuck wearing these green glasses, but it's the best place that I can be. It's uncomfortable at first to step in your story. When I first stepped in my story, we'd kind of lose business because I go, we don't want that guy to come in. He looks a little wild. But then long term, it's actually been the best place for business. And now people buy glasses and we fully step into, I've been able to fully step into my story. So my hope is for those that are already in your story, step deeper into it. For others of you, definitely step into that story. Don't do what I did, which is resist it for 15 years. And by stepping into your story, both as an individual and also as an organization, that provides the most powerful digital stamp that you can have out there. Now, a lot of you are thinking, what the heck's a digital stamp? So a digital stamp is just a fancy term for your personal brand. And your personal brand is just a modern term for your reputation. And we know how important reputations are for everything that you do. And when you look at your digital stamp, it's comprised of two things. It's comprised of your digital footprint. That's anything that we upload about ourselves or our organization. So we have control over that. But the more important piece is that shadow. That's what other people post about you online. And collectively, those form our digital stamps. So it's about producing our best and then also protecting it. And when we do that, that's really stepping into our story. And it's all about our reputation. And they're very powerful 5 seconds from now, as well as 50 years, 500 years from today.
My
digital stamp. My dad oft asked, what footprints are you going to leave in the sand? It meant little then, but with time, this became a motivating line. A legacy for me, it would seem, a far-off, lofty dream. After all, who am I? I'm just average, somewhat shy. Then I realized something, you see. It is up to me, my ultimate legacy. Social media, search, mobile, and more. Leave digital footprints on the floor. Digital shadows, if you will, following all that I fulfill. My grandchildren and great-grandchildren, what will they see and think of me? What is my digital legacy? Will they see that I pursued my dream or that I settled for something in between? Digital footprints remain for all time, so I can't commit the ultimate crime. What is that crime, you say? It is, of course, not seizing the day. Yes, before I die, I'd rather fail than not even try. I will reach for the sky, laugh, and cry. My legacy, you see, is truly up to me. That's my view. But now I ask, what will you do? By Erik Qualman. What will be your ultimate digital legacy? Your ultimate stamp on life?
All right. And hopefully it's a reminder to all of us, especially in business and also in life, is that just start with the end in mind. This stuff gets complex quick. So just start with that smile at the end. So that's a customer, that's a teammate, it's a partner, it's a stakeholder, and then work your way back. Because if you don't have that smile at the end, you're not going to be in business very long. So when it gets complex, always start with the end in mind. Now, as we look at A for action, nothing happens without action. Obviously, that's pretty intuitive. And so we said, well, everyone knows that, but what prevents people from taking action? There's a lot of things that prevent people and also teams from taking action. But the number one reason people don't take action is they're afraid to fail. Now, a lot of us hear that failure makes you better, which is completely wrong. And so I'm going to go over that in a second. But the reason a lot of us believe that is because we all grew up on a falsehood. Most of us grew up playing a sport or playing a musical instrument or both. And our instructor or our coach always told us that practice makes perfect, which is absolutely perfectly wrong. Proper practice leads to progress, and improper practice can lead to the wrong kind of permanence. Just like failure doesn't make you better, failing fast, failing forward makes you better. Meaning if you're going to fail, do it quick, fail fast, do it quick and do it cheap. You don't know what you don't know, so get out there. The second thing is, and most importantly, is to fail forward, you need to evaluate that failure. And that's the hardest thing for all of us to do, to sit down and say, hey, we made a mistake. What do we do? But by doing that, that allows you to fail better. You're not going to repeat the same mistake. And also understand you don't have to be the one making the failure. You can look at your peers, your competition, to see how they're either succeeding or failing and learn from that as well. And so what does that look like in the real world? This is a great example of what this looks like. So if you look at this example, this lady at the Red Cross, this girl at the Red Cross, she accidentally posted this. She thought she was hitting the button to post it to her personal account. Instead, she posted this to the global Twitter account for Red Cross. And for those listening, I'll just read it to you. Ryan found 2 more 4-bottle packs of Dogfish Head's Midas Touch beer. When we drink, we do it right. Hashtag getting slizzard. Gotta love that hashtag. But now within a couple minutes, since they've empowered all their volunteers and their employees, there's mistakes like this that can happen. But when they have that digital lemon, how do you quickly turn that into digital lemonade? So someone a couple minutes later said, we've deleted the rogue tweet, but rest assured the Red Cross is sober and we've confiscated the keys. Now the girl that posted the original tweet was not fired because the week this happened, they had a record amount of donations. Everyone thought it was funny. They put it in the New York Times, Huffington Post, and so Charlotte Observer. And when you look at that, what that is a word that I call being flawsome. So it's not that we're perfect that people love us. It's because we're perfectly flawed. And as organizations, to be Flawsome, what you need to do is when you make a mistake, when you have that digital lemon, it's about having that focus about producing that digital lemonade. So what that means is, whoops, we made a mistake. Second, here's what we're gonna do to fix it. And then 3, follow through and actually fix it. So that's all about being Flawsome. When you do that, I've worked with Avis, I've worked with FedEx, their data aligned to show that when they have an issue with a customer and they take the time to resolve that issue, that customer is 3 times more likely to repeat as a customer than someone that never had an issue in the first place. So it's really about embracing that and being as Flawsome as possible. Now, what we can do, we can actually use our bodies to help our minds step into that discomfort, to step into being willing to fail. And so you've been very patient. You're watching this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break because motion creates emotion, creates energy. I want us all to stand up because we're going to stand like superheroes, because it turns out I've done a lot of research around superheroes. It turns out if you stand like a superhero, it can actually help you reduce your stress by up to 20%. So I'd like all of us to stand up. I'm going to remain seated just because I'll get out of frame here. And so if we could all stand up, you're probably wondering, what does a superhero stand like? So take a deep breath, put your shoulders back, think of a string pulling your head all the way up to the ceiling. Take your hands, make them into fists, put them on your sides, right at your belt line. Then take your feet and then spread them a little wider than you normally would. This is called the Superman pose. If you want to do the Wonder Woman, just a slight head tilt like this. Personally, I prefer the Wonder Woman. But if you do this, I'll get some music going here. If you do this for 2 minutes, then that'll help reduce the cortisol in your body, which helps reduce the stress and allows you to kind of step into taking that action. Doesn't work for everyone, but we've done this in 55 countries. It works for about 90% of people. All right, that's about 2 minutes. You guys can remain standing or take a seat. Whatever's in your DNA this morning, make sure you make it happen. So that's A for action. For some of you, that is your superpower, sorry. As we move into M for map, the key is now in this ever-changing world, when you think about all these hurdles and challenges that are pushing us off our path, it's no longer having that goal and vision and being linear. It's actually about being firm at a destination, but flexible in our path on how do we get back there. So what does that look like? So I'm going to use this person as an example, just because everyone knows who this person is. Not a perfect person, just everyone knows who this person is. So if you look at Steve Jobs, he's got a firm destination in mind. He wants to put a dent in the universe. Now, at the age of 30, he's fired from Apple. The board fires him. He goes over here, he starts Next Computers, and then he becomes the CEO of Pixar. Now, around this time, Apple's in dire straits. A couple years later, they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We might go out of business. What do we do? All right, let's take a risk. Let's bring Steve back. So they bring Jobs back, and now he's a much better leader because of his time at Pixar. And they use some of the software they developed at Next to put in the new MacBooks. So at the time of his death, he reaches that firm destination. He puts that dent in the universe. They're the largest market cap of any company in the world, and arguably both good and also bad. The invention of the iPad and the iPhone changed our behavior more than anyone. And so really it's about firm in your destination and flexible in your path. And what does that look like? If we look at Wheat Thins, before the pandemic, how many of you bought your crackers online? Yeah, hardly anybody bought crackers online. So it would have been easy for Wheat Thins to fold their arms and go, digital transformation, focus on digital leadership. What? This doesn't have anything to do with us. It's for Ford, it's for Nike, it's for GM. But instead they said, hey, let's go out and see if anyone talks about crackers online. And sadly, they discovered a lot of people talk about crackers online. And they post stuff like, I'm out of Wheat Thins. My life is officially over. Now, whether you're Wheat Thins, whether you're in insurtech, fintech, doesn't matter what space you're in. With all this digital posting out there, that big data, it's about how do we use that? People tell us what they like and what they don't like. How do we take that and surprise and delight people?
This one's hilarious. I'm out of Wheat Thins. My life is officially over. Kind of dramatic. Tabitha.
Yes.
Okay, do you recall tweeting, I'm out of Wheat Thins. My life is officially over.
Yeah.
We got a hold of that. We just want you to be sure that you're aware that we have plenty of Wheat Thins. And that's for you. That's just a gift.
That is a lot of Wheat Thins. Oh my gosh.
Everybody in the van, let's go. In the truck. You take care, all right? Come on, boys. Who's next?
All right, pretty funny stuff. But if you look at this might be the most important slide that we show here today. So you might want to take a picture of it. Especially in 2020, we've been forced into innovation, which can be frustrating on a lot of fronts, but it actually is pushing us into that innovation. We need to understand that as pioneers, we're always going to get that pushback. When you're trying to do something new, you don't use old maps to get to new destinations. So when you pioneer, you're using a new map. So it's hard to explain to people what that is. And so if you aren't getting pushback, then you aren't pioneering. Or as a lot of leaders out here, is you got to understand if you're pushing back, you might be pushing back on that pioneer, which isn't necessarily bad. It's just understanding that there's pushback's part of that process. And also understanding that if there isn't pushback, that's when you got to get nervous. Because if there's no pushback, that means you're not pioneering. And that's when you got to get nervous and say, we're about to get disrupted. So always understand that if you aren't getting pushback, then you aren't pioneering. So that's M for map. For a lot of you, that's your superpower. And then last but not least, it's P for people. Surrounding yourself with the right people, both offline and now more and more online. Now, all of you are very successful. So I already know you know how to do it offline. And when you put it in an analogy, it's like Flintstones and Jetsons coming together. It's always that harmony between Flintstones and Jetsons. You can't replace the coffees. You can't replace the lunches. But when time and distance, and in this year, safety are an issue, it's really about how to use these tools to deepen those relationships. When forced into the Jetsons world, how do you become more Jetsons-like? But as much as you can, you've got to have that harmony. You always start with the Flintstones and then layer in the Jetsons. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to give you how do we develop relationships digitally. There's a lot of ways we can do it. I'm going to give you the most powerful way to do it. It's called posting it forward. And what I'd like for you to do is put in your calendar right now, 3 minutes a day, to make sure you're posting it forward for at least 3 minutes a day. Very powerful. You see the impact 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, just by doing this simple activity each and every day. So what posting it forward is, it's basically taking the selfie mentality and doing an unselfie. And so it's shining the light on others out there. And the beautiful thing is, it doesn't matter what tool you like. So if your favorite tool of choice is email, you might find an article you enjoy and you send it to two people, whether it's a prospect, whether it's a customer, whether it's a client, whether it's a friend, whether it's a teammate, just saying, hey, I know you like this stuff, so I thought you'd enjoy this article. What you're reminding that person is your relationship matters. So when time, distance, or safety are an issue, you're reminding that person their relationship matters. When you can't have that lunch, when you can't have that coffee. Or it might be your favorite tool of choice is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you post, here's 3 people in the community doing great things. You post that out there. Or it could be like using LinkedIn, and you go and endorse someone for hopefully skills they actually do have, but go and endorse them on LinkedIn. Again, test it out. It's called posting it forward, but it's also basically you networking before you actually need the network. And you know this, that's why you're successful. People outside of this call right now, they don't get that. They don't understand that the worst time to network is when you actually need the network. You always want to constantly be networking before you actually need the network. So we went over a lot by design in a short amount of time because everyone's different. And so my hope is that you take at least one thing you can use, not only 5 seconds from today, but 5 years down the road, because we know technology changes every second, but human nature never does. And so for some of you, you might start making a not to-do list. Others are going to stop multitasking. Most of you will be posting it forward. And so it's really about figuring out what's best for you. Others will now understand it's a firm destination in mind, but flexible in my path on how we get there. But what I wanted to do is in the chat room real quick here, because I want to see how it breaks out, is just type in which one is your superpower. Again, you're good at all 5 of these habits, but which one is your true superpower? Is it simple? Is it true? Is it act? Are you really good at taking action? Is it map? Are you more strategic, firm your destination, but flexible in your path? Or are you P for people? Are you just great with people? So yeah, start firing those in the chat room. And as you fire those in, this is my favorite part. And we save time for a little bit of Q&A here. And again, you have my email address if you need to reach out to me in the weeks or months ahead. But I want to thank Dan. I want to thank Venture 365 for having me here. I want to thank all of you for joining us here today. And remembering, despite all the chaos that's currently around us, it's really about controlling the controllables, being as focused as possible on a daily level, because focus can be learned. It's a habit. And all digital leaders understand it's about getting back to your core superpower to make sure that you're stepping in to your key strength, that you're stepping into your story. Don't do what I did and resist your story for 15 years. Fully step into your story, and that will allow you to have your best digital stamp, which again is just a fancy term for your reputation, which your reputation is ultimately the impact that you have 5 seconds from now, as well as 500 years from today. And we'll take some questions from the audience. I know I got a first one here. Is anyone excelling at adjusting in the pandemic? So it hasn't been easy, but you've seen some people that quickly adjust on the fly. So I was working with this large company, and they do point of sale at these restaurants. And what they did is they adjusted so that their software could then handle all this curbside pickup. So they're actually thriving with all this curbside pickup, because now all these customers that they didn't have require a different software to handle this influx of orders. You've also seen others that have dusted this in manufacturing. Now they're producing masks. And so it's really interesting. You've seen others excel like Zoom, others that just create that demand if they're ready for it. Grocery stores, the demand way up. And so they've had to adjust with the curbside pickup. Us, what we did is when you're stuck, always ask the question, how can we help? So when the pandemic first hits, I primarily, generally speak live on stage. I'm like a hugger. I need that oxytocin. So I'm normally live. And so when that goes immediately to zero, we have an animation studio, animation company. So I asked our animators, how can we help? And we started to brainstorm. I go, those charts? I love those charts that move. They're really easy for us to see. And there's no charts out there that are showing the movement of COVID-19. Is that something, if we find the data source, can we animate that on a daily level to help people? And so we were one of the first companies to do that. And again, we're doing that kind of to help. There's no revenue involved, but all of a sudden, by just asking that question, how can we help? It allows us to produce those videos, those graphs, and all of a sudden someone reposts it on TikTok, gets 20 million views. All of a sudden our YouTube channel subscriptions go through the roof. And it's not why we did it, but it's also a secondary result just by asking, how can we help? It kind of leads you in that direction. So that's a great question. Other questions?
We have a question from Adrian Belvit. What advice can you share for people who are struggling to focus as they work from home?
Okay, Adrian, great question. For people working from home, what is your recommendation on how to focus? So in the book, we talk about cowboy scheduling and cowgirl scheduling. So it's about fencing off specific times for yourself and then leaving wide open spaces as much as you can. Obviously, you might have a boss, but it's really about fencing off specific times for yourself to focus on the most important thing. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is the night before, write down the one thing that makes everything else either easier or unnecessary. By writing it down, it'll actually make you sleep better. And that allows you to focus and attack that item within the hour that you wake up. So when the hour of when you naturally wake up is your power hour. And so it's really attacking that before the day attacks you. So I think we have time here. So I'm going to actually do an exercise with the whole group here. So I want you to think through when you would naturally wake up on a Saturday morning. Let's say it's a Saturday morning. There's no kids. There's no activities. They're going to make you get up. Think about when you naturally would get up. Okay, so you got that in your mind. If that answer is 7 a.m. or earlier, that means that you're a robin. If you're 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., that means you're an eagle. And the majority of us are eagles. If you're 10 a.m. or later, that means you're a night owl. So you're either a robin, an eagle, or an owl. And this changes over your life. Most of us become robins as we get older. Most people that are younger are more night owls. But inherently, when would you naturally get up? So if you're, let's say, an eagle and you get up at 8, what you want to do is basically between 8:30 and 9:30, that's your power hour. Just crush that one thing. Attack the day before the day attacks you. And so that helps you maintain that focus. And then when the world of chaos, when you're working at home, and you might be homeschooling, then you're basically playing with house money once you knock out the most important thing first. And so that's helpful. So cowboy, cowgirl schedule, and then also figure out what's the one thing that makes everything else easier or unnecessary and attack that before the day attacks you. Other questions, Anna Maria?
Have you seen effective tactics on how leaders can check in with their teams now that they are not face-to-face?
Okay, effective tactics, checking with the team now that you're face-to-face. One, you got to check in more. Two, I'm going to give you this thing that you should do actually when you are face-to-face, but it's really important when you're virtual. A lot of us, like think about when you're in a restaurant, the waiter, waitress comes over and they ask, or the server, and they ask, hey, how's your food? Unless it's terrible, you're going to say it's good. Most of us are people pleasers. And we ask how you're doing to our employee or a teammate or a peer, they always say good, because that's inherently, people don't want to complain. So what you want to do is ask a more specific question. Be careful, like be obviously cognizant of the boundaries. And so maybe start off light on this, but I always ask my teammates, how are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10? And then they'll answer, and then they can't say 10 because you can't be perfect. And so if they answer, say a 6, I go, okay, you're at a 6. How do we get you to a 10? Now, sometimes you might ask that question and say you can't use the number 7, because most of the time, try this out. When you ask, most people will default to 7. When you remove 7, it changes the equation. Now a 60, that's not very good. A 6 out of 10. An 80, that's pretty good. And so by removing that 7, that helps. Now, the third progression, again, be careful from an HR standpoint. The third progression is ask them how you doing in life from a 1 to 10, because now that gives you context. Then ask them how you doing with XYZ company. So how you doing with Equal Man Studios, 1 to 10. That gives you context. Before, without context, you go, how you doing 1 to 10? They say 3. You're like, oh my gosh, this is our top performer. They're going to leave. What are we going to do? But if you ask that question, how are you doing in life 1 to 10? And they say 3. And then you ask, how are you doing at Equal Man Studios 1 to 10 and say a 9. Now you know that the company, the organization's a positive impact, the team's a positive impact, that the issue's more on the life side. And again, these lines are blurred, so it's really harmony. So be careful how you go about doing that, but that's a good progression. Just check in more often than not, and also start asking questions that actually give you hard answers like 1 to 10, and how do you improve on that? I think that's it for time, but definitely reach out to me. I'd love to answer any questions that you have. You've got my email address, and I'm Equal Man across the board, so hopefully you find me. And thanks for having me here today. It's been amazing.
Well, Erik, that was fantastic. I always love hearing you, and every time I've gotten the opportunity to hear you, your thinking has kind of evolved and move forward, and we really appreciate you being with us today. Erik's new book, by the way, is The Focus Project, and you might have seen that in the background along with the digital leadership book that he's done. Erik has been kind enough to give us a few autographed copies of it. So this is actually going to be the speaker gift for all the panelists and the presenters that we have at Venture 135 this week. We're going to send an autographed copy of Erik's book to all of them as a thank you. We're also going to add 5 of these autographed copies to the prize packages, if you want to call it that, or visiting sponsor booths. So in case you don't get the chance to win the Mac Air or the $500 SIA gift card, there'll be a few other winners of people with the opportunity to win an autographed copy of Erik's book. And I love kind of his philosophy on staying focused, the STAMP methodology. Matter of fact, I know coming up after this is our first pitch party in the InsurTech Day. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break to come back and do that. But I think I'll send us off with this one with the Superman pose in honor of Erik Qualman. I'll do the Superman superhero pose. And so with that, I'll send you off and we'll see you back in 5 minutes.